The Holy Gospel according to Mark, the 9th chapter.
Glory to you, O Lord.
6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John and led them up a high mountain apart by themselves. And Jesus was transfigured before them, and his clothes became dazzling white, such as no one on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." Peter did not know what to say, for they were terrified. Then a cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud there came a voice, "This is my son, the beloved. Listen to him." Suddenly, when they looked around, they saw no one with them anymore, but only Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them to tell no one about what they had seen until after the Son of Man had risen from the dead. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
So our family likes to hike. Or maybe it's more accurate to say that Kim and I like to hike, and the kids tolerate it, usually. The last couple of vacations we've taken, Kim and I have been sure to find those hikes where you can get to the top of a mountain some way or another. Now, if you've ever done a hike like that, you know the hike where it feels like all you're doing is heading straight up a mountain. You know that there is a common question among people that you cross paths with on the trail. What is that question? How much farther? It's like the kids in a car. Are we there yet? How much further to the top? Are we almost there? Yes, the map you're carrying can give you a lot of information, but you're still never quite sure how much further it is to get to the top. So typically, if you're heading up the trail, up the mountain, and someone is coming down the trail who's obviously just been at the top, you might be inclined to ask them, "Are we close to the top yet?" Please say yes. So frequently on these hikes, we will make it to the top, usually. We'll be up there for a little while. We'll take in the beauty that we find. We'll celebrate our accomplishment. We'll reward ourselves with that snack that we've been, hungering for before we turn around and head back down. And as we're heading down that mountain, we start passing those who are just in our shoes, the ones who are heading up the mountain, And you can tell they were doing what we were doing, breathing hard, digging for your water bottles, praying that you're near the top. And they look at us then and start saying, "Are we close to the top yet?" And without fail, I will answer them, "Well, you're closer than when you started." I think I'm hilarious. Come on, this is supposed to be fun. Let's bring a little joy and levity to the endeavor. Every once in a while, they'll laugh with me. More likely, they just glare at you. And Kim, by the 10th time I've said this, doesn't find it that funny either. That's not going to stop me. But what is with us with wanting to climb mountains? Now, I know it's not everybody's cup of tea. Maybe the trail is not terribly accessible, if even at all. Or maybe you used to like to do those things but simply can't anymore, or you just aren't interested. But I think we're drawn to the top of mountains because usually what's up there is something magnificent, something that can stir your heart, something that can change your outlook on the world even. I mean, it's quite rare, but it's happened that we'll get to the top of the trail or top of the mountain, we'll think, "Oh, this is it? This is what we came for?" Maybe it's a really dry season and that spectacular waterfall they talk about that we wanted to go see is just a trickle. Or it's that kind of day where you get to the top and all it is fog and you can't see anything. Or you get up there and there's literally just nothing to see. It happens, but usually what you encounter when you get there is something completely awe-inspiring. That's why we call things mountaintop experiences, They're spectacular and powerful experiences that change us. Which is, of course, as we heard, what these three disciples who were invited by Jesus to follow him up the mountain, it's what they got to experience as well. So we heard that Jesus leads Peter and James and John up the mountain apart from the other disciples. It's just the four of them. And then, as the Gospel of Mark does so well, we're thrown into this rapid-fire experience. We hear that, Jesus is transfigured, his clothes become shining and dazzling white, Elijah and Moses show up, a cloud overshadows them, a voice comes out of nowhere, and then suddenly, it's over. And they return back down the mountain. I bet if they were coming down the mountain and there was someone they pass who's heading up there, they'd probably say, I would not go up there if I were you. Man, it sounds like it was an utterly terrifying experience. Even Mark tells us, Peter did not know what to say, for they were terrified. We hear this story every year in worship as we turn the corner from this Epiphany season and look toward the beginning of Lent. And every time we hear this story, I wonder, what in the world is this about? What does this mean? This time around, I began to wonder, is this what always happens at the top of mountains? Especially in the Bible. Think about some of the stories you know of mountaintop experiences in the Bible. Think about Moses, since he makes an appearance today. Moses would frequently go up the mountain, which were often covered in clouds, and there is where he would talk to God. And later, when Exodus 34, when one of those times when Moses comes back down the mountain, after he's been talking with God, people can tell what he's been doing because his face is glowing. It's shining. His appearance has changed. So much so that he has to put a veil over his face so he doesn't scare everybody. That's quite an experience. We heard about the other person who appeared with Jesus at the top of today's mountain, Elijah. We heard about him in the first reading today. Elijah was that prophet from ancient days who spent his career trying to convince people that there was only one God whom they should follow and worship. And as we heard in that reading, his work comes to an end as he is taken up into heaven in a fiery whirlwind, leaving behind his disciple, Elisha, to pick up that mantle and continue the prophet's work. Elisha was granted that mantle, a double share of it, in fact, only if he was able to witness God's presence when Elijah was taken away. Again, God transforming prophets and followers through these unbelievable experiences of light and majesty. But nevertheless, Elijah's back, at least to make an appearance. The Jewish people always believed that Elijah would return since he was taken to heaven and didn't actually die, and that when he did return, that would be a signal that the fulfillment of God's work is beginning to be ushered in. Elijah's presence was known to change things. So again, I have been wondering this week, is this what happens at the top of mountains? Even with Jesus, we hear often about how he goes away to pray, to be alone with God, with his Father. And most of the time, no one else was invited into those moments. And I wonder if those times of prayer were quiet, solemn moments like we might expect, or was Jesus maybe sneaking away and going up the mountain to meet with ancient prophets and be transfigured and have these conversations with people out of the sky? And it was only finally at this time when Jesus invites three of his disciples, Peter and James and John, to along for the ride. That was the first time that these humans get to experience the majesty of this visit. But no matter how frequently or not this happens, those disciples were changed by that experience. Even after they were told to keep quiet about it, to not tell anybody what they had seen until it was the proper time, despite that, they were different people from having been on that mountain. Which is probably why Jesus invited them there in the first place. Like I said earlier, I've climbed a lot of mountains to the top of many mountains. I mean, I make it sound like I'm scaling Mount Everest. It's just medium-rated trails in a national park, but never have I had this kind of experience when I get to the top. Like I said, not all of us do or can make it to the tops of mountains, so what about us? Where does this leave us? If we don't get these burning bush moments where God talks to us, or where we don't hear God's voice speaking to us from the clouds, where then do we encounter God? Where are we to find transformation? I actually think there's a lot of places that we can do that. This morning, for instance, we're about to witness a baptism. And while the event itself feels like a pretty low-impact event, they come up, we say a bunch of words, we sprinkle a little water, we light a candle, we all clap for them. The ritual itself represents nothing short of transformational. It's a sign of God breaking into our life. It's God naming and claiming someone, Violet, child of God. And it's an opportunity for the whole community to show our love and support for the faith journey of a family. There are many other places this kind of transformation can happen throughout our week. Maybe when we break bread with a friend or a loved one at our dining room or a restaurant table, or even with an enemy at the cafeteria table. Maybe it's when we put a name and a face and some flesh on an issue that we hear so often in the news, but always feels so different until we experience it differently. Or maybe it's that moment where something just clicks for us in the middle of a prayer, or in the middle of silence, or as we're reading and studying our Bibles. Hopefully over these past few weeks here in worship, these stories we've been hearing, stories of God's light and love shown through Jesus into this world, hopefully those stories have changed us, transformed us, changed our outlook. And now with Lent right around the corner, we become witnesses to this whole other side of Jesus, a side of Jesus filled with sacrificial giving and humbleness, and a season where we ourselves try to embody some of that humbleness and sacrificial love on our own. So it may not be on the top of a mountain, but God's light is always breaking into our lives and changing us just a little bit at a time. It's a long journey that we might be on, but at least while we're on the way, we can be assured that we are always closer than where we started. Amen.